Hello, welcome to another episode of Global Education and Career Management podcast. Today's podcast is episode number 3, titled Global Regional Educational Opportunities Outlook, presented by Daniel Obi. So today's the presentation outline. If you look at the presentation outline, so we divided all the countries in the world into 10 regional grouping. Uh, Regional group 1, 2, 3, 4, up to group 10. So um, the reason is it will now help us to look at different conditions, certain parameters you need to consider if you are trying to find a country that will fit for you. So this podcast is all about, we want to bring all the information uh, at at one bus stop, so that you don't need to go be doing all the search and all that. We've done everything for you. What we need from you, pay attention, you will get everything. Then, so we'll start with section 1, introduction. And in the introduction, so we'll start with recap of episode number 2. So in the previous episode number 2, quick overview of the global educational opportunities. In episode 2, we discussed how factors other than you drive the global education and career opportunities. Uh, Also, in episode number 2, we discussed 3 academic programs and 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 each detailed admission requirements. So you need to go back and listen to episode number 2. If you want to do undergraduate degree, we discussed it. Then graduate, we discussed it. So number 3, we also looked at 5 major selection criteria that, if you have, will open access to global educational opportunities. So we'll discuss, okay, if you want to study first degree, if you want to study masters, and you submit your application, there are 5 things that the people that will give you admission, the admission committee, they will look at, then they will rank you. So you need to know the 5 criteria, so that even before you submit your application, you will be able to have an idea of whether you are going to be admitted or not. Then also, we discussed the importance of finance, money, in achieving your educational goals. So today, we'll be looking at the factors driving global regional education and career opportunities outlook. So what we are going to learn today, you are going to see each country that we mentioned, their total population. We'll be looking at also the economic outlook, because most of this country, if the economy is growing, they tend to bring in more foreign students. So you have to look at, what is the lingua franca? Do they have a language of study other than the national language? We looked at the number of university, whether they have a large number of universities or not. Then we'll look at what are the tuition fees and the living expenses. Is approximate, not the exact, but at least it will give you an idea. Then we'll also look at, do you have opportunity to work as a student while studying? Can you work in that country? Then the seventh factor we'll be discussing is post graduation work permit. When you finish, can you work? Then if you work in that country for some time, do you have access or possibility of obtaining permanent residence? These are things we'll be looking at. So let's go to the first region, the global region 1, which is North America and Britain and Ireland. So in this global region one, we have 4 countries: US, Canada, United Kingdom, and Ireland. So the first thing you need to understand about any of these countries, if you decide to attend them, attend any university there, is you check HCR, Human Capital Index, of that will now show if it is high, it shows that the admission competitiveness is likely to be high. In other words, and you have to check it with your country. If your country is lower than the any of these country that I mentioned here, it then means you need to go extra mile. Okay, so the another thing is that you see all the country here except Canada, their lingua franca and the language of study is English, except Canada, where they use both English and French. Then number 3 point that I want you to understand is majority of Ivy League universities in the world, they are concentrated in this region, like University, MIT, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, University of Toronto, McGill. Most of them are concentrated. Yale, Cornell, they are concentrated in this region. So what it simply means that if you are these universities attract the brightest of students. So the 4th point I want you to consider before considering this country is their tuition fees and living expenses are relatively high compared to others, and therefore it will affect the burden of financial proof for study permit approval. So if you are coming to study in any of these country, the sponsorship must have enough money in order to get a study permit. Then number 5th point we want you to consider is all these countries, the 4 countries, allow students to work part-time while studying. In other words, their study permit comes with work permit. Also, but I want to say something. If you are from this thing change, sometimes it change. It depends on the government in this country. If the government is anti-immigration, like in UK, sometimes they can change. So pay attention whether as at the time you are applying, whether when you finish, can you work. Among these 4 countries, it is the Canada that is their ability to get permanent residence is relatively easier compared to the other. But the 4 countries give you opportunity to apply for permanent residence after many years of working full time. Like if you look at the table, you see in US is 1 to 2 years of OPT, or 5 years of EBGC. But in Canada, permanent residence is that yes, once you finish, they call it provincial nominee. For UK, 5 years after graduation. In other words, when you graduate in UK, after 5 years of working, that's when you become eligible to apply. Ireland is the same thing as 5 years. This thing changes. Also, in these countries, there is absolute freedom of religion, speech, and association. So, and rule of law and due process. So we'll look at the section 3, which is global region number 2, Western Europe. So the country, there are 2 sets of countries in the Western Europe. You have Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and Austria. So we group them like that in table light blue. Then light dark, we have countries: Switzerland, Spain, Italy, and Portugal. So you discover that Human Capital Index of these countries is also high. Spain is 0.7, Italy 0.7, Austria 0.7, the rest is 0.8. So if you're applying to study in any of these country, check if your country's HCI is less than this, it then means you may need more effort. Admission in these countries are competitive. Then second point is that the lingua franca of most of countries in Western Europe countries varies across these countries, and it's not English. Like Germany, their national language is German, France is French, Netherlands is Dutch, Belgium speaks, I think they have three national languages. They speak Dutch, French, and English. Austria is German. So, but majority of the courses in these universities in the Western Europe, you can get them in their national language and also in English. They offer in English. So, if you don't speak their national language and you want to apply in English, is possible. But most of these courses in English seems to be more expensive. You don't pay the same tuition fee if you are to study in their national language. Then another thing is that tuition fees are cheap for citizens and European Union students, but high for international students. But something like Austria, if you are from Africa and some part of Asia, if you get admission in Austria, tuition fee is free. And also in Germany, there is some part of Germany that in the northern part of Germany, the tuition fee is free. Also in generally, living expenses are very high, and which could affect the financial burden. Also, in most of these countries in Western Europe, it provides opportunities to work part-time while studying. So if you are studying there, you have chances of working. But also, if you don't speak their national language, it will affect the kind of work you get. So I will advise, always make sure that if you are studying in this country, enroll in their national language so that you learn. Also, these countries provide opportunity to work after graduation, and they also provide possibility of having permanent residence after years of working full time. It varied from one country to the other. In Switzerland, it's 10 years. Most Spain, Italy, Portugal is 5 years. In some countries like Germany, 2 years. Country like France is 3 to 5 years, depending the part of the world you are from. Because then also, but the permanent residents, if you don't speak their national language, you're expected to learn their national language. Also, there is a high degree of freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process. So we are through with Western Europe. We will now move to another global regional bloc, 3, which we call Scandinavian countries. If you look at the table there are 4 countries. There are other smaller countries, but we want to concentrate on these 4. We have Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland. So these are the 4 countries that we call the Scandinavian countries. I didn't mention Denmark is there. So in this country, you see that human capital index is also very high, 0.8. And the lingua franca of Scandinavian countries varies across the countries. In Denmark is Danish, in Norway is Norwegian, in Sweden is Swedish, in Finland they speak two, Finnish and Swedish, in Iceland they speak Icelandic. Okay, so but in the language of study, most of them do have programs that you can do in English, but with condition that as you are studying in English, you'll be studying their national language. The tuition fee are free for citizens and European Union, students, but high for international students, except PhD, which is free. So if you are a minority, maybe you are from US or you are from Canada, like your parents are immigrants, you are very intelligent, you want to do your PhD. If you don't have a scholarship, why would you take a student loan? Go to Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Ireland, go and do your PhD and come back. So that's why this podcast is providing comprehensive information to help a lot of people. Also, the living expenses are relatively high, and it will affect the burden of financial proof for study permit. As Scandinavian countries provide opportunities to work part-time while studying. Also, there is opportunity to work full-time after graduation. And in most of these countries, in Scandinavian countries, you may have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after years of full-time work. So you could see in Denmark about 8 years, of Norway 3, Sweden 5, Finland 4 to 5, Iceland 4. So, but the point also I want to mention is that when they say permanent resident, there are other conditions which include at the point of applying, if you didn't study in their language, you need to show evidence that you can speak their national language. So the earlier you start speaking their national language, the better for you. Also, there is absolute freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process. So we'll go to Global Regional Bloc 4, which is we lump them together, Eastern and Central Europe. Instead of in Eastern Europe, we just we have Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. There are other countries, but we just decided to pick these three. In Central Europe, we have Hungary, Czech Republic, Croatia, Slovak Republic, and Slovenia. So for Eastern Europe, look at the table in light green. For Central Europe, the countries that we've mentioned, look at the table. So you'll find out that their Human Capital Development Index is also high. It's only Romania and Bulgaria and Ukraine that their Human Capital Development Index is 0.6, but Russia is 0.7, while the highest is the Czech Republic, which is 0.8, and Slovenia 0.8. Okay, so in the national language of countries across Eastern and Central Europe varies across the continent. Like for Hungary is Hungarian, for Czech Republic is Czech, for Croatia is Croatia, Slovak is a Slovak, Slovenia is a Slovenia, For Russia, it's Russian language. For Ukraine, it's Ukraine. But in Eastern Ukraine, they speak Russian. In Poland, it's Polish. Romania is Romania and Bulgaria. So also but increasingly most universities in this in Central and Eastern Europe, they are adapting some of their program in English language. But of course, if you are going to study in English language, the cost is going to be more expensive if you are to study in their national language. The tuition fee are cheap for citizens and European Union students, but relatively high for international students. But it's far, far better for maybe international students. Like if you want to study medicine, pharmacy, engineering in these countries, is going to be cheaper compared to the Western Europe and Scandinavian countries. Then living expenses are reasonable. You can see the amount at the table and will affect the burden of financial proof. Countries in Eastern and Central Europe provide opportunities to work part-time while studying. Yeah, you can study there. You can work part-time while studying. This opportunity to work there's opportunity to work full-time after graduation through employer sponsorship in North America. So it's different. So you can apply and obtain a post-graduation work permit. Then you start looking for a job. But in Eastern and Central Europe, it is your employer that will apply for you. So what it simply means that if you don't have employment, you may not be able to apply. But if you follow us and you join our mentorship, global mentorship institute, we're going to give you a kind of an idea how we are going to do that. Okay, so and yes, you have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after studying. You can work after working in a full time if you are lucky to have employer that sponsored you. And another point is that you are expected to be functional in their country lingua franca. So in this case, for you to have possibility of permanent residence, you show evidence that you are functional. You can speak and converse in their national language. Also, there is a freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process, except in few. There are some countries that, like in Russia, religion, no. In Poland, you have to be careful. It's predominantly Catholic. So if you are not of a Christian faith, so it's not that freedom is not as you have in North America or Western Europe or Scandinavia. So we'll come to Global Region 5, Oceania. There are 14 countries, but we'll focus only on 2, which is Australia and New Zealand. So you look at Human Capital Index of Australia and New Zealand is very high, 0.8. So compare that to your country. Then, of course, the lingua franca or national language of Australia and New Zealand is each of them is English language, and also the language of instruction in their universities is English language. The tuition fees are higher in Australia, yes, for even a citizen, and that's when you compare to maybe what the Canadians pay in Canadian university to what Australian pay in Australia is higher in Australia, and is very expensive for international students, while in New Zealand is far, far low. So you can see it at the table, blue. Check it. Then also, the living expenses are high in Australia and New Zealand and will affect the burden of proof for study permit application and approval. So, the another point is both countries provide opportunities to work part-time while studying. And also there is possibility to work after you must have graduated. So, and also you may have opportunity to obtain permanent resident after years of working full-time. So you could see in Australia is between 2 to 4 years. In New Zealand is 2 years. So you will see also there is a freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process. So we'll go to another global section 7, global region 6, Asia 1. So we just picked Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea. So please, there is we don't have any particular reason why we just pick only 4 and put in Asian 1 and pick another 4 or 5 and put in Asian 2. We don't have any reason. Okay, so when you look at the human capital index of the countries in Asia 1, so in South Korea, all of them are high. Singapore is the highest, 0.9. For Taiwan, we didn't obtain accurate reading. So if you are a Taiwanese and you are listening to me and you have a credible human capital index measured by World Bank, please you send it through the comment section. I'll be able to include it. So there you could see their national lingua franca in Asian 1 varies across, except Singapore, that their national lingua franca is English, Malay, Tamil, or Mandarin. Japan is Japanese, Taiwan is Mandarin, and South Korea is Korean. And also you could also see that, the language of study, especially undergraduate and graduate, is Japan. You can study in English there. In Singapore is English. Or in Taiwan you can study in English. Also in South Korea. Then the living expenses are very high and will affect the burden of proof. Countries in Asia will provide opportunity to work part-time while studying. So if you are studying in any of these countries, you can be working part-time. And also there is opportunity for a full-time work after graduation, but through employers' sponsorship. So what it simply means is that for you to be eligible, you have to get employment, and it's your employer that will now submit your application. So if you don't have, you have to go back to your country. Then you may have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after years of working full-time. You could see different duration. But you are expected to be functional in their national language. Then there is a limited freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process. Though it's improving, but you don't compare the freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process of Asian 1 with Scandinavian country, Western Europe. Okay, so we'll look at section 8, global region 7, which is we'll call it Asia number 2. So we lumped about 5 countries: China, India, Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia. So when you look at it, you find that the human capital index, the lowest is India, 0.5, followed by Malaysia 0.6, China and Vietnam 0.7, Philippines is 0.8. So the lingua franca in these countries varies across, of course, but courses in the universities are taught in their lingua franca, but many academic programs are offered in English, especially in Philippines. Most of the universities offer their program in English. Also, Indian and Philippines. Also, in China, you can see some courses that are being offered in English. Then living expenses, when we say high, it's not as high as Western Europe. It's okay, it's moderate. Then countries in Asia too provide opportunities to work part-time while studying, except China. There is opportunity to work full-time after graduation through employers' sponsorship, but in China it's very difficult. You may have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after years of working full-time. In most of these countries, theoretically, yes, but it's very difficult, especially in China, depending on the part of the world you are from. But you have to be functional in their national language. Also, there is cocktail limited freedom of religion, speech, association, rule of law, and due process, except India. In this country, India is you have a freedom of religion theoretically, depending on part of India, but China is out of the question. So we'll look at global region 8, South America and Caribbean. In South America, there are many countries, but we pick only 5. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Panama. It's about 6. Look at the table blue. Then we picked about 5 countries in Caribbean: Bahamas, Barbados, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to say Puerto Rico is a part of US. So when you look at the HCI, Human Capital Index, you find out that they are very high, except Trinidad and Tobago, that is 0.6 on part of Caribbean. Then also for South America, it's relatively is moderate. So the lingua franca of all the countries in South America is Spanish. You see why we put Mexico in South America instead of North America. But Mexico is part of North America, but for the purpose of similarities in terms of language and living expenses, we moved it from North America to South America. So all of them, including Mexico, speak Spanish, except Brazil, that Portuguese is their national language. However, English is the official language in 3 out of Caribbean countries. Cuba is Spanish, Puerto Rico is Spanish and English, but Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados is English. So the courses in the universities in South America are taught in Spanish, but many academic programs are being offered in English language. in South America. The tuition fees are cheap for citizens and moderate for international students. So if you don't have enough resources that can take you to Europe or North America, you may consider South America or Caribbean, especially Cuba. Cuba is a very, very good in terms of if you want to study medicine, go to Cuba. And also it's nearer to US and Canada. Also, living expenses are reasonable and will be easier to obtain study permits. South American countries do not have part-time work opportunities while studying, except Brazil. There is opportunity to work full-time after graduation through employers' sponsorship. I've explained it before. Also, you may have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after years of working full-time. You're expected to be functional in countries' lingua franca. There's also freedom of religion, freedom of speech, but it's not, of course, in Cuba, you have to be careful, except Puerto Rico, that is part of US. Most of these countries do not have the kind of freedom you have in the Western Europe. So we have global region 9, Middle East. It is very important that we selected some countries in the Middle East. The countries we selected include Israel, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates. So when you look at the Human Capital Index of Middle Eastern country, you see, is moderate, except UAE and Israel, which each has 0.7, the rest is 0.6. Their national language in the Middle East varies across. In Israel is Hebrew. In Turkey or Turkey is Turkish. In Iran is Farsi, that is Persian. In Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, they speak English. No, sorry, please. They speak Arabic. But the language of study, when you look at the language of study, is in their national language. But you can also get, program that you can study in English. So what is happening in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they are now welcoming foreign students. If you have first class, if you are smart, if you have a high SAT, and you don't have money to go to Western Europe, and you really want a high standard, as at now, you can apply. There are selected universities in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. If they give you admission, you can get a scholarship. Though we'll still come to that. There is no freedom of religion. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of association. You have to. It's though there is improvement, but I have to be. You have to be aware of that. The living expenses are high and will affect the burden of proof. The tuition fee are affordable for their citizens, except Qatar, but moderate for international students, especially Turkey and Iran. Okay, so there is opportunity to work full time after graduation through employers' sponsorship. Then, if you're from Africa, there is something that is happening in United Arab Emirates. For now, you may be careful of going there. Then also, you are expected to be functional in their country, in their national language. So if you intend to stay as you're studying, you have to be studying their language. As I've said, there is restricted and limited freedom of religion. Nobody will force you, but if you are not part of the their nation, because they are in these countries, most of these countries here, their laws are derived from religious book. So if you are not part of that, religion, you have to suppress your religious uh, belief, and you are not expected to discuss or express your religious belief, uh, except Israel. But also, that is beginning to change. Okay, so now we'll come to section 11, which is Global Region 10, Africa. So we have South Africa, Botswana, Tunisia, Morocco, and Kenya. The, the summary is in table blue. Then Algeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, Ghana, and Namibia is summarized in the table green. So generally in Africa as a whole, the human capital index is very low. The highest is 0.5, which is Egypt and Ghana. The rest and Algeria and Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia. The rest is 0.4, which is very small. Then the lingua franca of countries in Africa are mainly French, Arabic, and English. However, English and French are the two main language of instruction or learning in the universities. Also, courses in the universities in Africa countries are taught in English, Arabic, and French languages. The tuition fees are cheap for citizens, but moderate for international students. Depending, in some of these countries, private universities are very expensive. So be aware. Living expenses are very cheap and will be easier to obtain study permit. African countries do not have part-time work opportunities while studying, though the unemployment rate is high. There is opportunity to work full-time after graduation through what they call expatriate employers sponsorship. You may have opportunity to obtain permanent residence after years of working full-time. You are expected to be functional in the country's lingua franca. Also, theoretically, there is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, but it depends the part of the in most of these African countries, there is a very restricted except South Africa, Botswana, and Ghana, Kenya. Most of the North African countries, you don't have there is restricted freedom of religion. So the summary. So we've come to the end of this global regional educational opportunities outlook. So the idea is that so you can now see it. You don't need to you check yourself and said, okay, do I go to this place? Do I go if I want to go to this place? So you can check it out and see the requirements. So the summary, the first point is that the global educational opportunities as episode 3 title is classified into 11 global regions. There are many factors discussed in this episode 3 you must consider before opting for any country. Factors like the tuition fee, living expenses, the language of study. Can I work while studying? These factors include tuition fees, living expenses cost, working permit, permanent residence option, which differs across different global regions, will guide you in decision making. Episode 3 provided information on global regions with freedom of speech, religion, association, rule of law to guide you. Another point you need to take note of is pursuing your educational and career goals can be affected by your choice of country. So if you are choosing, choose wisely. The another point is investing time to carefully study and assimilate the content of episode 3 will give overview of global studying opportunity. So we'll be making reference of episode number 3 in all our discussion. When we're talking about scholarship, masters, whatever, we'll make reference to episode number 3. So this is very important. So I want to thank you for listening to this episode. Though this episode number 3 is long, like episode number 2, it is deliberate because it is a comprehensive information. So you can contact us through globalmentors@gmail.com. And please, can you be kind enough to press like button, subscribe, and give me your comment. Then check out the next episode, episode number 4, on pursuing your education dream 1. So we'll be looking at diplomas and bachelor degrees. For those of you that want to pursue your diplomas and bachelor degree in any country of the world, that's what episode number 4 is going to discuss. We're going to discuss it in detail. Thank you. And once more, please give me likes button, subscribe, and let me know your comment.